Hello everyone, it's Anahita Rao back again, today I wanted to speak about AshtaLakshmi yoga again. I received a lot of questions about the talk that I gave on the AshtaLakshmi yoga, and so I decided that I'll make a more elaborate video describing the 8 forms of wealth. Now, I first encountered this yoga many years ago when I was studying my own birth chart, and I became curious about it. But it's not a commonly found yoga in a chart, because Rahu has to be in the 6th house and Jupiter at the same time has to be in a Kendra position from the Lagna. And even then it gets modified when other planets are joining or aspecting them, etc. But nonetheless, I think the more important thing to note is that there are in fact 8 types of wealth that can be nurtured in your life. So rather than seeing life as sort of a one-pointed pursuit of material acquisition, it's good to remember that in fact there are 8 forms of wealth that we can look at. So now, what is the meaning of Ashta? Ashta means 8, and Lakshmi here refers to Lakshmi, which is the goddess of wealth. So now let's talk about the 8 forms of wealth that can be seen. The first one, of course, is called Adi Lakshmi, or rather Mahalakshmi, and this is known as the original prosperity. Here, Adi means eternal and never-ending, and this is related to knowledge of your source, of where you come from. It's something that it's something that a lot of people actually think about. How have you come to this world? Why have you come to this world? I mean, you may be 30, 40, 50, whatever it is. But where were you before this? What is your source? What is your origin? So when you have the origin, when you have the knowledge of such an origin, this is regarded as Adi Lakshmi. Things like, and again, these are questions that pop into many people's head, which is, where will I go after this? Where have I come from? Have I come here before, or have I been here all along? This is essentially the knowledge of the self. And you begin to understand, when you begin to understand this, it removes the fear of death. In this way, it helps to understand the essence of time, that the soul itself has a continuous journey, and this continuous journey is only momentarily affected by death. This also creates a sense of belongingness. So having a sense of togetherness and community, rather than focusing on differences amongst each other, you can focus on how we're all connected. So I want to read this quote from Sri Sri, who has inspired this talk today. Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, and he says, the moment you become aware of your source and your infinite past, your whole life changes. Like somebody becoming aware of how wealthy he or she is. It causes a shift in awareness. So essentially, this is what the original prosperity is, which is known as Mahalakshmi or Adi Lakshmi. And to see this in your chart, you want to look for a strongly placed Venus or Jupiter, which is quite helpful for this type of knowledge. So the next form of wealth is Dhana Lakshmi. Dhan is basically, it is wealth itself, which is money. Which is your bank balance, so it's the liquid assets that you have. This is Dhan. Now, with the desire for wealth, many of us can fall into the trap of doing immoral or illegal acts. But also, if you seek this type of wealth with force, then it actually ultimately fails to give any pleasure at all. It only brings sorrow and pain. But obviously it's important to have in life, especially in the era that we live in. So now what is this? Essentially it's wealth as material comfort, creature comforts, as we say. And it's essentially the physical type of wealth. So it's obviously important in the world that we live in today. But you will obviously, on the other hand, feel that you're sorely lacking in life if this is the only type of wealth you have. For example, we all know people who inherit money, but they can't succeed at anything. There are also those business people who spend their entire life accumulating wealth and building their bank balance. But in the end, what do they lose? They lose their health in the process. So ultimately, they don't really have much enjoyment from it. Then, of course, and when that happens, people start to label money as evil, or as the term goes, necessary evil, because what they're doing is that they're hoarding it and they're hanging on to it, and they're only seeking this type of wealth. The important thing to remember, of course, with wealth is that it needs to grow, because if it's fixed, it really has no value as such. For example, if you see the picture of Goddess Lakshmi, who is represented by wealth, you'll see that she's normally depicted on the lotus flower above water. And she's always depicted above water. But in fact, water is unsteady and always changing. So that's something to make a note of. Now, in your horoscope, the 2nd and 8th house have to be strong for a good bank balance. The 2nd house, as you know, represents earnings. It represents savings. It's where you hoard your money. It's where you build it, where you save it. And 8th house, on the other hand, represents things like inheritances and investments and money from other sources like your spouse, etc. The other thing I would say to note is if Mercury is strong in your chart, then this type of wealth will certainly be in your life. Now the third type of wealth to look at is known as Vidya Lakshmi. Now the word Vidya itself just simply means knowledge. And in today's day, we can regard that as education, and also ideally that education turns into wisdom one day. Now, unlike Lakshmi, as I spoke about, who's represented on a lotus flower above water, Saraswati, who is considered to be the goddess of wisdom and knowledge, in the images, if you see, she's actually depicted sitting on a rock, showing the stability and steadiness that comes from knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge can be used to cultivate wisdom, or it can be used for selfish gains. So if you're only acquiring an education for personal gain, then this does not become Vidya Lakshmi eventually. On the other hand, if the education is used to bring about positive change in the world and in yourself, then this is, of course, the manifestation of Vidya Lakshmi. It also symbolizes self-awareness and the knowledge of self. In your chart, if you look at Jupiter and Ketu, and they're well placed and getting good aspects, then this is a good indication of Vidya Lakshmi. As Ketu is essentially your memory of source of knowledge, the highest quality of learning and wisdom, and of course Jupiter is the Karaka for knowledge and wisdom. So this essentially, working together, Jupiter and Ketu would represent the love of learning, the love of knowledge. So the fourth type of Lakshmi is known as Dhanya Lakshmi, which translates directly, if you look at the literal translation, it's agricultural prosperity. So essentially, it basically means the food that we have access to, that we eat in our daily lives. For example, what happens if you have all of the Dhan, all of the money in your bank account, but you don't have Tanya Lakshmi in your life? There's those who have a lot of money, but they can't eat well because they don't have the time, or they live in a place that they can't access good food. Or there are those who have serious health issues and therefore cannot have proper food. Then there are those who are given really good food and they hoard it and they try to save it rather than sharing it. So by the time that they get around to eating it, it's been spoiled. For example, if you're given a luxury box of chocolates or something, and then it goes bad because you're saving it for a special occasion. So these are examples of having money, but not having, which I consider to be one of the more important types of wealth, and that's good food. We all know the saying, health is wealth. Now, one community that's a good example of having this in abundance is farmers. They have their own land, they have their own livestock and crops, and so they don't really feel affected by the ups and downs of the economy. Now, if you want to look at this in your chart, again, you have to look at the second house. The second house is connected to food. It's also storage, it's also savings, as we talked about. Taurus, the sign Taurus essentially should be getting good aspects in your chart as well, and uninflicted in order for you to enjoy this type of wealth. And then the other thing that I would look at is moon. So generally, moon symbolizes nourishment. So that's another thing to look at to see how this kind of wealth is playing out in your life. So the fifth type of wealth, which is called Dhairya Lakshmi. The word Dhairya means courage. So again, what happens if you've got all the money and even all the education and even all the good food, but you don't have Dhairya Lakshmi, you don't have courage? You see this in the corporate world a lot, where their subordinates are afraid of their bosses. You can also see this in very wealthy families, where the children they can be quite cowardly. It's not always the case, but it can be, because they get used to being provided for, so they never take chances in life. And then there's many people who have brilliant ideas, but they never do anything about it, because they lack self-belief, they lack courage, they lack initiative. And then there are those who don't have supportive people around them, so they only hear negative feedback from those that they're surrounded by, and which again brings down the self-belief. Courage is very essential in life for many reasons, because it not only gives you the drive and the initiative to take chances and better your life, but when you are going through bad times, it also helps you with dealing with adversities in life. It helps one to take risks, to see life as a game. And an adventure, and not be afraid of making mistakes along the way. There are those who leap into new territory, and even if they fall flat on their face, they just get back up, and they keep getting back up. And I think that's obviously the key, because of course you will fall flat on your face. So as I said, this kind of wealth is very essential. Because it also gives endurance to face the tough times in life. Now for this, of course, the chart, what do we look at? We look at a strong Mars. Strong Mars is of course important for courage and initiative and to take chances. And Sun as well, because it gives a person self-belief, it gives you faith in yourself. It also gives initiative to do the right thing. So this is another form of Lakshmi. So now we can talk about the sixth form of Lakshmi, which is called Santana Lakshmi. Santana basically translates into progeny, which is children. And of course, we can all see that children are a type of wealth and a blessing in many people's lives. They also help to continue the ancestral line. They can often bring prosperity and happiness in people's lives. But unfortunately, there are children who will bring only pain and suffering and troubles, and this is not considered Santana Lakshmi. There are, on the other hand, those people whose lives revolve around their children, and when the children grow up and leave, they don't have any regard for their parents. So for children to be a source of wealth, they should be a creation from love. Two people who love each other, creating a child, and that's what you ideally want, because in this way you can be sure that they will bring peace and prosperity and happiness in a person's life. Fortunately, a lot of people that don't love each other do often have children, and then you can see the results are contrastingly different. Children can also, regardless of whether they're a blessing or not, they can actually act as a block to attaining moksha, and that's something I'll discuss in a little bit. If you want to see whether this aspect of Lakshmi is strong in your chart, of course, you have to have a look at how Jupiter is placed in your birth chart. You have to look at the fifth lord, the fifth house, and that will tell you whether or not this type of wealth is in your life, and it will bring you happiness. Now, the seventh type of wealth is called Vijaya Lakshmi. Vijaya means to be victorious. So essentially it means being successful. So for instance, one may come from a very wealthy family and have everything given to them, but whenever they try to do anything on their own, they fail. So despite having a lot of wealth, they feel frustrated because they're unable to succeed at anything that they try. Or it could be the scenario where a person who is always trying new things, they simply can't get around to completing what they started. They start something new, they get excited about it, and by the time they get to step 3 or 4, they give up. So they don't complete what they started, and usually it's because something gets in the way. Or they could make excuses for not being able to do the smallest of tasks. So then this is also considered to be a lack of Vijaya Lakshmi. Then there are those who are so afraid of failing that they'll never start anything. And then on the other hand, there are those that just get things done. They overcome any obstacle that's thrown their way. They try new things. They never lose faith in themselves. So even if they keep failing, they'll keep trying, and in the process they will achieve success. So this is the idea of Vijaya Lakshmi. It's that which gives victory and ultimately success in your endeavors. So if you can manifest your desires, then of course this is a very nice type of wealth to have. And again, a strong Mars is good for this, because as we know, Mars is the planet that is linked to determination and drive. I would say also a strong Venus is helpful, because this helps you enjoy that which you do, and of course if you're enjoying something, then chances are you will succeed ultimately with it. Now we come to number 8, the last on the list of the 8 types of wealth. The last one is called Gaja Lakshmi. Basically, Gaja translates into elephant. It can also be called Vijaya Lakshmi. So this is essentially the power to rule, or the association with royal or sovereign powers. It personifies good luck as well, and it signifies having someone who has authority. So in our day and age, what does that mean? Essentially, it means connected to people who have status, enjoying good status yourself, and having powerful connections in society. So basically a high social status. So, for example, there's those who are given a lot of titles and distinctions, but nobody listens to their advice, as people don't respect their authority. And then there are those who naturally give off an aura of authority, and in their demeanor, you can just feel that sense of the aura of dignity. And there is power in that dignity. So some people tend to exude this type of power in their presence. Just being around them, you can sense it. And people who have Gaja Lakshmi also tend to be philanthropic and humble and charitable. Because in the eyes of the divine, the true kings and queens are the ones who serve others. So this sort of dignified presence is a type of wealth. Now, what do you look for in your chart? To see this, you would look at the 9th house. You would also look at the 9th lord, because that's connected to Bhagya, Bhagyastan, and that's connected to your luck, and that's connected to prosperity just generally. It's also the in the 159. It's considered to be the highest form of luck. It's also connected to your. They say it's connected to your future life, your future karma. But I think it's also, if you look at it from the Nadi perspective, it's also connected to your past lives. Another thing to look at is Rahu. Rahu is a planet that is associated with this form of Lakshmi. For instance, there's those who can rule simply by their name. For example, there's dynasties that carry on for generations simply because the leader has the same name as their grandparent or their great grandparent. And of course, a strong sun is also important to show this sense of dignity in a chart. So these are the 8 forms of wealth that we either naturally have or we can nurture in our life, and they're all connected to each other. And in some form or the other, in a larger quantity or lesser quantity or quality, we all have this in our lives, and it shows up at various aspects, and it shows up in various phases of life. And how much do we honor it and make use of it just really depends on us. Now, lastly, what I would like to briefly talk about is the 4 blocks to moksha, because that's connected to what we spoke about just now with the 8 forms of wealth. The first block to moksha is known as sattvic attachment, and that is basically attachment to our children. As we talked about, some kids don't like their parents, and then we have other issues with children. So whether or not they would be considered a form of wealth is really down to certain circumstances. But we have to remember that we're only a portal to bring our children here. They have their own karma to deal with, but the attachment to the children that we form is considered to be a block to moksha. The second one would be attachment to fame and recognition and popularity. For example, if you're a celebrity, that's sort of an obvious way that would happen. And nowadays, social media, one can get quite attached to things like popularity and recognition because everybody is using social media. The third block to moksha is considered attachment to this body and to perfect health. So obsession with beauty and health, attachment to your body and not wanting to age. So not recognizing that your body is very much impermanent. That can be something that can turn into a block to moksha. And finally, attachment to money. And this can, of course, as we know, take away your peace of mind. So if you don't feel that you know that money will come when you need it, then you're always worried about it. So this sort of attachment to money, always thinking about your next paycheck or your bank balance or your savings or your investments, this can also be a block to moksha. So that's all for this, folks. I hope you enjoy that. Feel free to make any comments, and also please subscribe below. Thank you.